Is your team not performing well? Is morale low and turnover high? Are you falling further behind the competition? I'm here to help. I'm your host, Shani, and this is the Leadership Show, where business strategy and culture finally meet, and we make the long-awaited shift from rhetoric to results. I promise I'm not your typical boring leadership consultant, and I will help you get your shift together. Let's do this. Hello, LeaderShifters. Welcome to the Leadership Show. I'm your host, Shani Magoski, and it is my absolute privilege to have an old and dear friend of mine on the show with us today, Dr. David Karli, who joins us from the Vail, Colorado area. Dave and I have been friends for, let's just say, many years, and we made the shift together, I would say, of moving to Colorado. We moved to the Vail area within months of each other, and from the East Coast, right? He had originally been in Pennsylvania and then Maryland for med school, and then Harvard for his residency in sports medicine. And then he was living in Boston when he moved to Vail to work for a preeminent orthopedic clinic. And I had come from, at that point, New York and a little bit of Chicago. So shifting into the Colorado lifestyle and adjusting to all the wonderful things that meant in terms of powder days, and even the headlines in the local newspaper were a little bit different, right? What do we call the newspaper in Vail? The Vail Daily, but we used to call it like the Happy Valley paper or something, because all the headlines were always about mountain bike races or ski races. You know, it's like, didn't really matter what was going on in the rest of the world. The Happy Valley had a positive headline. So welcome to the Leadership Show, Dave.
Thank you, Shani. It's such an honor. I'm so psyched for you to have the show number one. And we've been through a lot of shifts, I would say, you and I. We
sure have, and we're going to talk about a lot of them.
We'll talk about a lot of them, but my honor to be a guest on here, and to your viewership. I really appreciate you listening, and Shani is fantastic. So pumped for her and all the cool things she's doing. So let's have at it. Ask away.
Thanks, Dr. David. Okay. First of all, I gave a very, very quick bio, but take LeaderShifters on a little bit more detailed of a voyage with you. How did you get into what you do in terms of medicine, and what propelled you into that? What was your passion for it that led you? And take us from the beginning to kind of where you are now, and I'll pause at various points to get some more detail.
Sure. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm a bit enigmatic in my journey. But
there's the best kinds, the most interesting.
I wasn't the guy who grew up wanting to be a doctor since I was 3 years old. It was really an evolution and a confidence building through college. And I was kind of weird because I was a good student in high school, and I got to college, and I don't know what happened, but I just started acing everything. And whether it was a maturation issue or what, but I had never really thought about it until the A's started rolling in, and they just kept rolling. And I was able to kind of use that to create a focus, not only with my studies, but with my life. Mm-hmm. And my advisor in college was the one who said, hey, you might want to start thinking about medical school here, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was a young, naive kid, came from a great family, but no one in the family were doctors or anything like that. So I had no playbook. I had to figure it out on my own. And I think that was the first time in a series of many, many, many times in my career, I just had to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Right? There wasn't someone guiding me, telling me exactly what to do. It's, okay, this is what I want. I'm going to do whatever I have to go get it. I don't necessarily know exactly what that is, but I'm going to keep going until someone stops me.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality I've taken to a lot of things that we can talk about. But
yeah,
it was,
as long as I've known you, no one stopped you.
So far, yeah. And I still believe that today with the biotech business and some new stuff that we'll talk about. But it's the journey. And I on my Instagram page, I put collect accomplishment.
Mm.
right? Because that's what drives me. Yeah, I want to make lots of money just like the next person. But that sense of collecting accomplishment that's the juice for me, right? That's the energy for me to be able to say, I wanted that. I went, I got it. Okay. What's next? I want
Yep.
that. Let's get it. And that's
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, right? That's entrepreneurship.
Yep. Absolutely. So med school, Harvard residency. Tell us a little bit about your journey through Harvard and how you got out to Vail.
Yeah. Again, never thought I would end up at Harvard. I was kind of a small town kid and didn't have huge aspirations growing up, but the opportunity came up. I had the numbers and the network and the contacts. And, it's interesting. I'm glad we're talking about education, because in the entrepreneurial world, education is under siege. That you don't need to go to college to be a good entrepreneur, and you don't need to do this or do that. Well, in a trade, lawyer, doctor, would you want someone working on your knee who didn't go to, through the channels? Of course not.
Hell no.
So while I agree that you don't necessarily need, I've been in school half my life. You don't need that level of education. For some people, it's quite valuable and was quite useful. So I would challenge those people that say, you don't need to go to college, it's a waste of your time. It's about learning how to learn. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. One way is the formal way. The other way is immerse. The best way, in my opinion, is both.
Yes, I love that. Learning how to learn is so important. And whether you're in school or not, learning how to learn in an existing job is so important. The job that you signed up for 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even 5 months ago has probably shifted and morphed into something new. And we got to always be on that treadmill, keeping our skills current. So learning how to learn. I love that. Okay. Yeah. So Harvard, you didn't expect it. Small town boy from Pennsylvania, kicks ass at Harvard, and then gets heavily recruited by a top orthopedic firm in Colorado.
Yeah. My original intent was to have an academic career at Harvard, and my chairman at the time was very supportive and was pushing me in that direction. And I was put in touch through colleagues, through some of the guys in Vail who were looking for help, and they had created a tremendous opportunity here that just didn't exist in many places. It's kind of unique because we're a rural, small town, but we have some of the highest power orthopedic and sports medicine specialists in the world in a town of 40,000 people.
That's right. Just ask Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, exactly. many others.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Again, I was attending physician at Harvard at 29 years old. I was a partner here in Vail at 33. And, admittedly, I was a bit naive back then. And I just kept rolling. It seemed like a good idea. I had never skied really seriously in my life. I come to Vail, where skiing is the culture, but it was fortuitous because it allowed me to engage in a bunch of entrepreneurial ventures. I didn't know the entrepreneur was even in me back then, because I was buried in a book and going through a formal process for a very long time, and you have to do it that way. Yep. So the entrepreneurial bug, which had always been there, didn't come out until later because I was preoccupied with what I had to do. Yeah. But the opportunities that being here brought about, I probably couldn't have done in very many places. So there's always a little luck that you need, and you can't count on. Men, some say you make your own luck. But that was a lucky thing. The decision to come out here was financially the right decision. But more importantly, it allowed me to become me. And in a structured Ivy League academic environment, it's not that it would have been impossible, but it could have taken a very different path.
Oh, the bureaucracy of that makes me nauseous just to think about, versus even the clinic you were at in Vail, small enough to still have an entrepreneurial spirit, and decisions can get made a lot faster than in a big academic teaching hospital setting.
Well, and you came from the Wall Street world, right? Yeah. It was the same type of environment. And this was unique because it was a very high power place, but it was almost like you have it. So you come in and the culture was, well, we're the best, so you better be the best or you can just die and go away.
Yeah.
So here I am, a 31-year-old, doc, coming in with these legends in medicine, and I just had to figure it out.
Yeah.
You put your head down and you grind, and then as you start to learn and solidify, then my nature kicked in. And my nature is to always question, is this the best way we can do something?
Yep. Now,
Anytime you throw that at me, I'm going to say, is this the best way or is there a better way?
Yeah. Which is great, because that's how innovation happens. And when I think about you, I think about one of the smartest, most innovative people that I know. And leader shifters, you're going to learn about what that means in just a second. But let's pause for a second and talk about the shift that was happening in especially sports medicine at the time, which was going to more regenerative medicine and not necessarily prescribing surgical intervention at every diagnosis, and not just doing some injection into a spot where there's pain and having to redo that every 3 months, which was kind of what the protocol was for years. And I'm speaking not as a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV, but speaking as a patient who had some injections from you and other docs over the year. Talk us through kind of how you shifted ahead of the curve into regenerative medicine and how that brought you into the entrepreneurship of Grayledge.
Yeah, it's a great story. I like to say the field kicking and screaming, unwittingly allowed this to happen, but it needed to happen. So in a traditional model, which I was raised and brought up in, that's how I was trained and actually practiced for a long time. But I was never the type that, you plug and play, right? This is how you do it. And you're Marcus Welby and you show up every day and you provide the standard of care, and that's great. And I have a lot of respect for people that can do that, but it wasn't me. So we were using technology that was antiquated. If you look at steroids and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories in sports medicine and all, that was developed in the 40s and 50s. And while it had morphed in generationally, it was still the same concept. And I felt there was a better way. And it wasn't just me. There were many people working on this. It was kind of a movement that I played a part in. But we challenged the notion of the way you were taught is the best way and it's the only way, to say, well, instead of always blocking the body's attempt to fix itself, which is really the traditional sick model, right? The sick care model, is there a way we could support or work with the body to try to get it to do better? And we say regenerative medicine or healing augmentation or promote healing, there's lots of different ways to look at it.
Right.
But it was a complete 180.
Yeah.
Instead of stopping the body from what we were doing, block, suppress, prevent, it was promote, support. So it was a totally different mindset.
It was a shift.
And that took me to Europe to do a bunch of research. I was one of the first American doctors to visit some of these clinics that were using really innovative novel tactics. But when I came back, none of the products that they were using were licensed in the US.
I remember that.
We had to figure it out. Love the concept, work with the body. How are we going to do it? So it took it took 10 years to really pilot and work on and practice. And it led me into a field that I believe has a strong future, but has also some quirks to it. And we're trying to bring some legitimacy scientifically to it. But it was a challenge the norm type of scenario. And doctors are extremely conservative.
Yep.
Extremely conservative. And they don't like change any more than most people. So
right. And the insurance companies who insure them are even more conservative.
Well, they just blow it off.
Yeah.
But it was, it was one of those things where my peers said, well, that seems kind of dumb, Dave, but we're not going to stop you, so go ahead. And now, obviously, I was a little ahead of my time there. Culturally, things have progressed to become more mainstream, with cell therapies and stem cell therapies. And the things we were working on 10 years ago conceptually are starting to get more and more of a foothold.
Absolutely. Okay. And so you shifted from not only practicing medicine on a 5-day-a-week basis and running clinics, because by the way, Dave wasn't just practicing medicine at the elite practice and at the hospital in Vail, but also volunteering your time in some of the poor communities in south of Vail, as I remember. I remember you having to make a drive about an hour and a half was a couple times a month. So also giving back, by the way.
Yeah,
anyway.
Great experience. Just some of the rural communities in central Colorado that didn't have access to care.
Yeah.
And in winter, it's harder for them to get to us, so we go to them.
Which I always appreciated. And so in addition to doing all that, you started your own biotech company, essentially. So tell us about that and the journey, including, the MBA.
Yeah, it just made sense. I tend to pursue things from a career perspective that makes sense to me, right? I mean, some people can plug into a job, any job, and be really effective. If I don't really think it's a good thing to do or a logical thing to do, it's harder for me to really engage and commit completely. So again, we had this concept of there's a better way to do this. We didn't have a vehicle. So literally I'm proud to say one of my proudest achievements in business is taking an idea from a napkin through execution, through profitability, and now at this point to scale, almost running the entire business cycle. We're close. Hopefully we'll see that through, but we needed a vehicle. So we just said, okay, how are we going to deliver cell therapies and growth factors and the things that we're using to promote and stimulate healing? So we created this lab concept where we have what we call an orthobiologics laboratory. So we can process in a lab, a real lab, a patient's tissue into what we want that's implantable, either by injection or surgically, to do what we needed to do. So that was hundreds of operating procedures and quality systems. And I took the opposite approach of most biotechnical executives, which is the unwritten rule is don't ask, don't tell with the FDA. We went to the FDA on day one and said, here's what we're going to do. Because it was so new and so controversial and so dynamic that I didn't want to start. And I self-funded this 100%, even to date, 100% self-funded. I didn't want to start only to have the FDA come back in and say, nope, it's wrong, you're shut down. And we've seen that with lots of companies. I wanted them to come in on day one so that we could shift if we needed to do it right.
Yep.
And it was about doing it right. So it literally was from scratch, and it was lots of consultants. There wasn't a lot of value in it, so I couldn't raise money. So no one wanted to put money in, including my own partners at the time.
Yeah.
And so I just did it. I mean, it was work and grind and all the usual cliched business entrepreneur things that you hear. I had to do that. We'd live it every day and practice medicine. And then as I started the company and launched it, I realized I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know how to run a company. I had no training, zero. And while some of business, as you know, is intuitive, I got my MBA. Again, that's how I work. Go learn.
Yep.
Some people would say, I learn on the job, learn on the process. And that's great. I learn best by saying, here's the curriculum, hammer it out. So I had a full-time practice, CEO of my biotech company. And for 2 years, I drove to Denver every weekend to get my MBA. That's how I did it.
Yep. And, it's what you're describing is common in many very technical professions like medicine and law and engineering and architecture. I see it all the time with my client base. They're taught to be really good at their field, but everything else tend to be blind spots. They're not taught how to do marketing and business development. They're not taught how to be profitable. They don't understand all the expenses and costs that go into running a business. They don't know how to manage people. It's frankly one of the reasons I have a very busy consulting practice.
Right.
I do a ton of work with hospitals and other medical professions because it's like the blind leading the blind in some of these organizations. So like my hat's off to you for actually going and getting that MBA and getting some business acumen to support you in growing Gray Ledge.
Well, it was learning a language, Shani. It was, you forget all that stuff 6 months after you get your MBA if you're not really immersed in consulting where you're doing a lot of different things.
You mean you're not still doing discounted cash flow analysis, Dave?
There's a funny story behind that, which hopefully we'll get to later.
Okay.
But no, it's more getting comfortable with a lot of things. I think as a CEO, whether it's with a startup or a Fortune 100 company, you have to be good at a lot of things, but you're not necessarily going to be the expert in any of them because it's vast.
Right.
So you have to understand a lot about a little. Or no, a little about a lot. Sorry.
Right. I was following it.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was, for me, it was about learning a language. The application of that, and this is where I would criticize MBAs. People say, do you need an MBA? I did. I needed to learn the language. But the application, there's still a gap between that diploma and execution. And that's where I had to learn on the job. That's where I had to figure it out and still continue to work hard on figuring that out.
Okay.
So it was valuable. It's not for everybody. It's really expensive.
Yeah.
For me, it was useful. I had the means, and it was worthwhile.
So tell us about some of the obstacles you encountered along the way as you shifted into entrepreneurship. And those could be personal or business or really anything that you think would be informative to people who are either in the process of making the shift into entrepreneurship or even contemplating.
I like that, Shane. Entrepreneurship.
Shift.
I think we're onto something.
I think we are. It's like the brother or sister brand to LeaderShift.
Hey, can we write a book called Entrepreneurship together?
Yes, we can. You're on. You're fucking on. Yes.
Man, I love it.
You heard it here first, LeaderShifters. Entrepreneurship. With collaboration between Shani Magoski and David Karli, MD.
We're doing this. That's what it's about. And to answer your question, it was daily, and it's still daily. The problems never go away. Mm-hmm. You don't know what they are when you show up every day. You know, medicine was a different set of challenges and problems. I'm very proud of what I did in medicine. I'm very, very proud of it. But the more and deeper I got into my medical practice, the more I realized I needed other things to fill a personal void. So let's start a company, an FDA regulated biotech company, which takes your cells, does something to them, and actually implants them back into the body just for shits and giggles. Right.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, in all seriousness, it is a very serious business. So I think the medical pedigree and the serious nature of that matured me to be able to take on a project like this. Mm-hmm. But it was no different than any other startup. It was every day, you don't know what's going to slug you in the face, and you got to figure out how to get through it.
Yeah.
When you're self-funding it and we're not relying on OPM, mm-hmm. right, other people's money, it's even harder. Because if you screw up, guess who has to write the check?
You. Right. You. Look in the mirror.
The bootstrap, right? It was a classic bootstrap. So, man, you want to talk about a learning ground. It's drink from the garden hose, and I liked it, and it was good for me because a lot of people would say, hey, Dave, why don't you just go raise money? And it would be so much easier to do that. But it held me accountable. Mm-hmm. By funding it and leading it, it held me accountable for that final product. And I think this was my first real serious startup venture. I'd consulted and done other things, but I wanted to say we lived the business cycle. And I still to this day want to say we lived the business cycle. I think that's the ultimate success story for any entrepreneur, is to take it from napkin all the way through and to live every stage. I think that's where the real growth occurs as a business person or as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Now, that's all great big picture stuff. Let's take it down to ground level and get a little more granular. I'd love to hear what some of the tips and tricks you would recommend to the LeaderShifters listening to this about how to juggle all those fucking balls, right? You had so much going on and so much at stake everywhere. Yeah. So any best practices that you can pass along for, how do you keep your head above water?
It's really hard. And, when I look back, was there some magic? I'm always envious of those guys that say, I followed these 4 principles and it's made me wildly successful. I didn't know what the hell I was going to have to deal with every day when I showed up. So how can I structure, other than real general notions like we just talked about, an idealistic, structure in your brain framework, it was really, there's so many hours in the day, and you got to use as many of them as you can, really. That's what it was about. It wasn't some magic formula that you plug in and play. It was be malleable, right? Be comfortable with challenge and adversity and difficulty. You have to get comfortable in that space, because it's going to be difficult and it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to push your own limits. And I think being able to adapt and overcome those things really was everything. And it gets back to, you know, kind of this concept of, call it confidence or call it faith or call it whatever you will. This belief that you can do it has to be there. And it's not, some people have this blank notion that I just knew I could do it. But you know what? When you get into the shit, it's not so easy. You don't know if you can do it. You don't know if you survive that day. You don't know if you're able to pay that bill or that consultant.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, yes, it was, I was confident I could do it, but it was more, can you adapt to a very dynamic environment, sometimes with very negative one? And can you just keep getting through until you start to achieve some of those hurdles and you get a little bit of breathing room. And what do? Hire people.
Yes.
So you don't have to be the solopreneur, because I do believe as a quasi-solopreneur, that can only go so far. And you start to limit yourself and you start to limit your company if you don't give up the reins, the entrepreneur's dilemma, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I've taken it as far as I can take it. Now I need some help.
Absolutely. So starting with, sounds like radical prioritization based on your passion and what you know you can accomplish, and every day waking up and saying, this is important. I'm going to use every hour in this day that I possibly can and going to roll with it because I know that it's never going to turn out like I expected.
Yeah.
And then getting help, whether it's a consultant or full-time folks employed to get on that train and help drive it on the track forward.
Maybe to use some of my old business school, that overpriced business school education, it's about value.
Yeah.
Not just the value you create to others, your customers. It's the value you create to yourself as an entrepreneur. So getting back to what I said earlier, if it was important to me, right? It was the work that was worth doing. And every day you got to say, through the adversity and the challenges, and when you're like, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to deal with this problem, it's work that's worth doing. And it really is important. It's valuable to me. And I think, call it passion, call it what you will, if that is there, that's going to translate into your product that goes to consumer or to patient or to customer.
Absolutely.
When you care about it, you have to care about it.
You know, another question that just came to mind that I think our audience is going to be super interested in hearing your perspective on is, so you started in a space where you were on the, no pun intended, bleeding edge.
Yeah.
And you were a very early entrant into this regenerative medicine with stem cells and PRP and all these other things that are pretty routine treatment now in sports medicine. So along with that, the sheep start to enter the fold and the competition goes up. So you sort of had the market, not quite to yourself, but at least in the United States, you had a pretty good commanding lead in your space. And I can only guess that in the ensuing years, as the adoption of this stuff started to increase, so did the competition. So tell us a little bit about how you approached that and shifted through the change in dynamics in your marketplace.
Probably one of the biggest hurdles. It wasn't competition. We were too far ahead, if that makes sense. We were radical in what we were doing, not just taking cells and using them therapeutically, but how we were structuring. And our company focuses on quality control. So we know exactly how many cells and populations and everything about that implant we know, and are looking to try to standardize, if you will. So the thought was, don't just take this magical soup, put it in there and expect it to work. It was, let's break this down so we can understand it scientifically and then make it better or optimize it once we understand it better. So taking the art out of the practice of regenerative medicine a little bit and pumping some science into it was desperately needed. But we were so far ahead that the concept was really foreign to docs who were just starting to get comfortable with this notion of even doing it in the first place. Now that we're throwing all this stuff at them, and it took a while to catch up, but it did. And when it did, then really we started to see what you were talking about and the challenge. And it was nasty. It was ugly. It was at times unethical. It was unfair. But you know what? Wham! You know,
who fucking knew?
Right? Yeah. So you can feel bad for yourself and lose your company, or you can say, you know, well, this sucks, right? I hate this. I hate having to deal with other people who are willing to cut corners to try to get ahead of me, because I had to watch a number of companies outpace us because we were doing it right, and the resources and the time slowed us down that were required to do that. It slowed us down. So I had to have the discipline to watch other companies move faster than we did, because we were doing it a very certain way that we believed in those principles. And it was really tough to watch. And then, you know, I heard a statistic, I don't know if it's true or not, that 50% of all businesses, one of the founding members will steal from the other. The system. 50% of
God, I hope that's not true.
I hope it's not true either, but it's a lot. And unfortunately, we didn't have to deal with that internally, but we did have to deal with it externally from people who were close to the company, wanting to a hostile takeover, basically, on 2 occasions almost occurred. And
they wanted your IP, and they wanted it bad, huh?
Well, they wanted it, and they knew it was vulnerable as a young, immature company. So they did a discounted cash flow analysis.
Which thankfully you understood at that point.
Yeah. And what happened was basically a party that was close to me came in and said, Dave, we want to buy your company, and you're either going to sell it to us or we're going to start a competitive one. And they were under an NDA. They had an intimate knowledge of the company. They were able to get into my books because they asked me to do a valuation as a possible acquisition. And then I didn't feel they were a good fit and said no. And they went ahead and started a competitive company with a lot of that IP. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when you're a small company, have to deal with kind of the big guy, little guy scenario.
Yep.
And that can get into a court of law, and you can get starved. All kinds of really bad things can happen. And you can't always envision them coming your way, and you have to deal with them. So we're working, you know, that hurt the company.
Sure.
Because we did have, I don't say we had blue ocean, but we did have a nice path forward to scale. And it was as soon as we tried to scale that they came in and saw, okay, this is scalable. We want it. And we want it for nothing. Right? So we had to fend that off, take the hit, and then figure out a way to continue to try to scale, which is what we've done really in the past 12 months. And it was expensive. It was really expensive. So again, it's one of those things. How much do you really believe in your idea or your platform or your company or your value? Are you willing to go to any depth to see that through? Because you're always fighting doubt in anything that's hard to do in life. And sometimes you're like, well, it would be a lot easier if this just went away. Let's move on to the next entrepreneurial venture and figure to go with that. Because you hear what 9 out of 10 startups fail. All right, let it fail. It's dying. Let it fail. No problem. Let's move on. It's easy to do that with other people's money, but when it's your own, it's a lot harder to do.
Right. And there's so much history in it already. So what shift did you have to make in your mindset to get through that difficult time where you had people who you trusted, who were close to you, who were sort of threatening you, and then essentially borrowing your IP?
Well, there was a couple of call them shifts. There was a couple of things we had to deal with. Number one, I knew it was going to be a difficult course when that happened, because financially, this was also a client that was using our products, one of our largest clients that tried to do this. So we took a big financial hit. So I had to make some business decisions like, do we debt leverage? Do we fundraise? And we ended up using debt as a business resource. So I took that on. And
with a personal guarantee, no less, right?
Well, it was my assets. What assets do you have put against this company because our cash flows were way down at this point. So we had to make the decision on kind of where to get money to continue to drive. Now we're scaling, right? So we need capital like a lot of small businesses. So but it was even more philosophically, it was more, is this worth continuing? Because it could fail. It was always vulnerable, as any startup was, but now it was really vulnerable. And you had to go kind of back to the core principles of the concept. Is this, number one, is it really valuable? And number two, can you make it work financially? Because the idea, you can say, well, I'd love for the world to have this, but if you can't figure out how to make it profitable, the business will die.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we had to say, all right, are we going to slug this out or not?
Yep.
It was not an easy decision after 10 years at this to say, okay, we're going to see this through really difficult times.
Yep. I see clients in that position all the time, even those who aren't entrepreneurs, but leaders who are faced with difficult decisions on a daily basis and having to ask themselves those tough questions and ultimately make commitments and see them through. So bravo to you for doing just that.
Well, I think there's two ways you have to look at it. One is your ego, right? Because you get bruised if this thing dies as an entrepreneur. So one is more personal. What does it mean to you personally?
Yeah.
That's probably not the best way. The second is financial, is a business decision, right? Does this really have legs and traction? We were too far ahead. That was a timing mistake. And maybe we should have changed our offering a little bit to allow it to grow with the field. We're too far ahead. Mistake on the CEO's part. Okay, we got through that. It caught up. Now we've got this second huge hurdle to deal with. Are you sure, Dave, that this is worth it? Because now we've got employees and we've got people that are relying on us to make their living. And I could have just turned the switch off.
Right.
Move on to the next thing. But I just couldn't do it. And we continue to try to grow and scale.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in the process, helping a lot of people heal their own injuries and recuperate from accidents and alleviate pain. And I'm a regen patient myself, and it's pretty miraculous. So thank you for what you've done to contribute to that field of medicine. I think it's amazing. And
it wasn't just me. There was a lot of people working on it. We were very unique, though, and it was a unique value proposition because the benefit at the end is to the patient eventually.
Sure.
We need a vehicle. We need an interim. So our company makes the product. We still needed the doc to deliver it. So we had to create value for the customer and also a B2B for the doc. So it was kind of interesting to try to create value in both. We had to make the doc a great clinical product that could make them money or it wasn't worthwhile. And then we had to make it work clinically for the end consumer, the patient.
Right.
So it was complicated.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears to the third major shift that I've bared witness to you making, which is into your latest venture, which is Entrepreneur MD. And I can't wait for you to tell our audience, our leader shifters, about it, because I think this is huge and you are exactly the right person for so many reasons to be rolling out with this. So take it away. Tell us.
Working with stem cells gets a little stodgy after a while. I needed something to do. Let me maybe just announce, this is kind of the first public format that I'm talking about this.
Drum roll, please.
Entrepreneur MD coming your way soon.
Yes.
So Entrepreneur MD was a project which we've been kind of testing over about 12 months with a lot of different concepts. But the premise was, who takes care of entrepreneurs? Their health.
No one.
Because we lead incredibly unhealthy lifestyles, and I am one. Right? So who's supposed to take care of your health? Well, your doctor is. Well, if your doctor understands the rigors of entrepreneurship, maybe they're going to be more effective at being a resource for you so that you don't have to live in your car and look like you're dying as you're trying to build your business and your dream.
Right, and just keep buying bigger and bigger hoodie sweatshirts to fill your growing girth.
Right. Well, and yes, but I had a unique perspective. Every day I see very high net worth individuals who didn't take care of their health along the way, who now have all this money and all these resources, and they want to go now live their life because it was put on hold, and they can't do it because they didn't take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We said, what good is wealth without health?
Sure.
Was the premise. So we said, if we can get to entrepreneurs, not only do we have an immense opportunity with some very structured things to create a health platform with a really unique situation of, I'm not going to tell an entrepreneur to slow down or meditate or, you need to take time off or take a vacation. I know what they have to deal with. So it's the opposite. No, we want to support those rigors with resources that are going to allow you to perform better, healthier, with more energy and more stamina to handle that schedule, but also not lose your health or put on 30 pounds or create things that we know will ultimately bite you in the ass down the road. And we call it, there's a couple of fun buzzwords and programs that we're looking at called the Inflammation Project. So when we put on weight, right, visceral obesity, truncal obesity, so our bellies, our butts, right, if we put fat on there, that is an inflammation vehicle.
Right? I know not of what you speak.
Us all probably. And inflammation really is the root cause of almost every chronic disease process that we know about.
Absolutely.
So we knew we had to get control of inflammation in these people who were leading unbelievably stressful lives that were unhealthy. And if we could get control, we knew we had an opportunity to impact their health and also make them more effective at what they had to do. Yep. So Entrepreneur MD is based on that premise. Then we had to figure out, okay, what's the vehicle and can we commercialize it successfully? So it started out, well, let's see if people are responsive to me as a personal brand. So a lot of social media work, Instagramming, Facebook, you've seen a lot of the stuff we've done. We created davidkarli.com, and then it was reasonably well received. So I started a pilot web-based TV program called Entrepreneur MD. And that was through Grant Cardone's TV network in Florida, in Aventura. Grant is an amazing entrepreneur.
10X,
also,
baby.
Also, and Grant, if you hears this or his team, he's taken very good care of himself now too. And he's become more of a health inspiration entrepreneurs as well as a motivational one. But so we piloted that. It was reasonably well received. So now we're creating funnels that are going to drive traffic to get me to entrepreneurs to present this, to say, hey, I want you to succeed in your entrepreneurship, but you're going to need your health along the way, and we can help you to do that.
It is so much music to my ears. I wrote a book last year called The Better Boss Blueprint, and chapter 1, I shit you not, is called Get Your Own Shit Together First, as the first step to becoming a better leader. Because if we don't have our own selves right, whether that's in the head or in the heart and all of our bodily functions, we cannot possibly be the most effective leader that we can be. And whether that's in an entrepreneurial situation or a Fortune 10 company, everyone's got to learn to take better care of themselves. And the challenge gets more and more immense every day with the stress levels and the devices and what's in our food and all those demands on our time. I'm obviously preaching to the choir, which is one of the reasons you started with this.
I have to live it too, because I am an entrepreneur.
Sure.
I still have my medical practice. It's getting harder to maintain full time, but I still have it. I still have the biotech company. We're taking this new thing on, and I love that, but I have to do it too. So one of the things that I said is, if we're going to do this, then I have to be the example from a health and fitness perspective. And it really led to a lot of personal challenge to set a fitness bar. I always say, if you went to the cardiologist and he walked into the room smoking a cigarette, would you listen to what he had to say? Of course not. So I have to look the part, and that involves, being very fit. And I like, to do a lot of weight training, and I'm kind of a wannabe bodybuilder, right? Going to be 47. but that's the whole point, because my schedule is as bad, if not worse, than anybody's.
Anybody.
If I can do it, then you should be able to do it too. So it's not just me telling you what to do. It's me telling you what I do in order to look a certain way, feel a certain way, and to be able to take on all these things and maintain this schedule. So I didn't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to say, all right, this is the path. This works. We know it works from science. We know it works from personal experience. Here is the example. You can do it too.
And you make it easy for people from what I've been able to see. This is oversimplifying, but like teaching entrepreneurs how to hack health and do it quickly and easily. You've done all the legwork.
We call it the standard operating procedures of your health.
The standard operating procedures.
Right? So everyone knows standard operating procedures, right? If you don't have the blueprint, right, you can't, you just end up kind of aimlessly wandering, wasting time. And the point is, entrepreneurs have a very finite amount of time. We got to use that really wisely. And the way to use that wisely is to know exactly what we're going to do for 40 minutes that day and get out of the gym so you can get back to what you need to do.
Right. Get out of the gym and make sure you have the right things on your meal plates.
Right. The choice discipline from plate to mouth, and then the choice discipline to get into, whether it's more of a functional training or resistance training. I like weightlifting because it's the most efficient way to get fit. It's the fastest way to do it. I say, well, weight training is boring. Well, yeah, but if you want to get out of the gym in 40 minutes, that's what you have to do. Interval training, miserable, but it's the fastest way to get your result so you can get back to your business.
That's right.
Or your family or whatever other obligation you have.
Yeah, it's the fastest way to get back onto this thing.
Which is where you want to be, right? So don't tell me you don't have time. Okay, I understand time constraints. So let's figure out a way to be super efficient.
Yeah.
Back.
And correct for carpal tunnel from this, and screwed up neck from this, right? Where a lot of these chronic pains that we have in our body are self-inflicted from working so hard and being in front of computers and sitting in chairs all day. So everything will crescendo back into place when you take care of your health.
That's right. We live our lives in a 2x4 box right here in front of us with the head down. The body's made to move. But here's the thing. I'm not going to tell entrepreneurs don't be in that box, because it's where you need to be.
Right.
Get it. Okay, we're going to work around that. Let's figure out a path so that you can do that, but also not kill yourself in the process. So you're not one of those guys that I see that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and can barely walk.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I wish that we could continue on this, but at this point, I have to ask you, what are, just in closing, a couple of your best tips for leader shifters when it comes to really anything that we've covered so far? Because we've really covered a huge variety of topics today. Yeah,
I think, there's so many things, but I keep coming back to faith. Again, not religious faith, although religious faith I believe is very important and an important piece. But faith in what you're doing. If you don't have faith, it's going to die. It's a high likelihood, 90% chance it's going to die. I don't want to take on a venture and fail. I don't like to fail. I'm not afraid to fail, but I don't like it. I don't want to. So you've got it's commitment, conviction, faith, whatever you want to call it. It is the single biggest cog that has to drive a project. And that doesn't guarantee success, right? You got to put in the work, and you got to put in the time, and you got to overcome the adversity. You have to go back to faith. Do you believe this is worth work that's worth doing?
Yeah. It's like finding your why, as Simon Sinek talks about.
Right. So if your why is to make money, that's valuable to you. Okay. You're going to be really effective in making money or making money for others. Right. For me, it was different. Right. My medical background makes my job to help you, but I don't want to help you be sick. I want to help you be healthy.
Right.
So I believe in that. I believe completely in that. So faith is the number 1, 2, and 3 thing that I believe you have to have as an entrepreneur. You have to have faith, because it's going to take only a leap of faith to be able to be effective in this space, which is rough and tumble, as you know.
Yep. Absolutely. I love that. Okay. And how can my audience of leader shifters reach you, learn more about you, participate in Entrepreneur MD? Hit us with the information, Dave.
I'm going to find you. Don't worry. I'm going to find you. So I'm going to be coming after you because I want you to get your health back as you're doing these things. But if they want to get in touch with me, they can visit davidkarli.com. Karli's Karli, davidkarli.com.
Mm-hmm.
We've got kind of the framework and structure that was the genesis of Entrepreneur MD on there so you can get a feel for it.
Okay.
Entrepreneur MD is launching. It will be a heavy marketing campaign to try to get to people that I believe we can help. So my email, david@davidkarli.com. Please reach out to me if you're an entrepreneur. It is our responsibility to give back. That's why you're doing this podcast. That's
Absolutely.
why we love talking about ourselves. But if I can help other people be effective in executing on value, everybody wins. So if you're an entrepreneur, if I can help you with my experience, great. If I can help you with your health, great. That one's going to cost you.
But it's worth it because without your health, you have nothing.
Well, it has to be worth it or you're not going to pay it. And that's the point. It's my job to create value in that respect. So it's my mission to find you as an entrepreneur in your listenership. Okay. If you're not hearing from me, email me, say, hey, I haven't heard from you, Karli. What the hell is going on? You guys better get going. Ramp those efforts up. I want to be healthy.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. David Karli. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for rushing home from your medical practice tonight to join us East Coast time on the LeaderShift Show. And thank you to all the leader shifters who have been listening and watching this podcast today. I hope you found it as inspiring as I have found my friendship with Dave all these years and watching him accomplish all these things, making all these just inspiring shifts and rising to new challenges all the time and figuring out how to balance it and being constantly in touch with that passion and that faith to continue plodding forward to really create what you want in your life and to be of service to others.
And thank you, Shane, for creating.
That sounds like that's really the message is know what you want and believe in it enough to do what you have to do, to manage your time wisely, to keep afloat in the face of adversity. And of course, importantly, to take care of your health, right? Leader shifters, if you do not have a healthy diet, if you are overweight and starting to be at risk for heart disease or diabetes or stroke or any of the other horribly chronic diseases that kill people way before their fucking time, davidkarli.com, Entrepreneur MD. Check them out and continue to tune into the LeaderShift Show. Thank you for joining us today. You can reach us at hello@theleadershiftproject.com or find us on any of our social media. Reach out, let us know what topics are you hot to hear about on the LeaderShift Show, and or do you want some individual in-the-moment coaching to help you shift your actions or to help you shift your mindset to be more successful. hello@theleadershiftproject.com. We'll be back next week with another episode of the LeaderShift Show. This is Shani signing off and encouraging you to always be thinking about how your business strategy and your culture meet so that we can continue to cut the bullshit rhetoric and transition it into real results, just like Dr. David Karli has done. Thank you, David, for joining us today, and thank you, leaderships. Thank you, leadershifters. Okay.
Great work.
Mwah. So do you. Bye-bye.